What's up guys, Cass here, and today I'm going to show you guys how to turn this pile of foam right here into this awesome Breath of the Wild Traveler shield right here. Alright, let's get it. So the first thing we're going to do for this build is we're going to elongate this half tube of EVA, and it does stretch out to about this much. Right, so basically what we're going to do is grab our heat gun, heat this up, and then once we have it heat up, we're going to pull and tug at it and elongate it. Try not to pull too hard, just do it in sections, just a little bit at a time, because if you do snap this, there's no backup that comes with the kit, so make sure you don't break it. Just pull. Alright, and you guys will see what this is used for later on in the build, but this is really the first step that we're taking. Alright, for our next step, we're going to grab our blue piece here. Well, you guys might not necessarily blue, you might get gray. The color of the foam doesn't really matter. And what you're going to do is grab your heat gun. You're going to heat this up on both sides. Then we're going to give this a curve. Alright, you can use your elbow to kind of curve this out. You can use your knee. You can use a half hour together heat gun and curtain rod combo to get yourself a nice curve inside of this circular piece. Right. So you should get something that kind of looks like this. So now we went from this flat piece to a more dimensional part, and we're going to put that aside for now and move on to the next step. Now the next thing we're going to do is connect some of the small strips that we got. So on some of these you might still have the puzzle piece ends. Just grab yourself a nice sharp X-Acto blade and just cut those off as straight as you can. Once you have all your cuts done, grab yourself some barge contact cement. I have my little glue pot. I have some links in the description to where you guys can get your own supplies if you're interested in getting this type of stuff. So we're basically going to put these together and do one long strip. So I'm going to fast forward through this process and catch you guys when I have everything put together. Alright, now that we have our nice long strip, the same thing that we did earlier with our half tube, we're going to do to this. We're just going to give it a little pull and elongate it a little bit, because we want this to be long enough that it goes around the entire circumference of our 4 shield parts when we put it together. Okay? Which is one of the reasons why I send 4 of these, just in case it's not enough, right? Or someone doesn't pull it out. But usually this should be more than enough. So I only have 3 of these put together right now, and we're gonna move on to the next step. Toss this aside. All right, so now we're gonna grab 3 of our larger pieces. All right, so we're gonna do the same process for the large one and string 3 of those together. All right, so now we'll bring in our pizza slice pieces for the shield. Now, one thing that you're going to do, you'll notice that there is, it's kind of like really rough textured surface here, which is the laser cut part that has been almost heat sealed, right? It's the same thing as the back end here. You're gonna wanna sand this down. And to give you guys a nice contrast, right? You can almost tell that this is like pretty much black and charred, and this isn't, and this is nice and fuzzy. So what you're gonna do is grab yourself some sandpaper, okay? And you're gonna sand off all of those edges until you see it nice and fuzzy and you have access to the foam underneath and not the charred remains of the foam. So you're gonna do that around all of your edges. All right, so all of my parts are sanded, all gray, no more black. nice and fuzzy. And that is inside, side, outside, all over, all right? So once we've sanded all of our edges, we're gonna go ahead and grab our heat gun and seal the outside of our foam. Once our parts are nice and sealed, I don't know if you noticed, but the foam kind of changed colors a little bit. That's how you know that you've done a proper job. And when you do heat, do make sure to constantly move your heat source around, or else you will burn the foam. All right, now that we have that, we're going to glue our pieces together. Okay? So I'm gonna go ahead and do our barge. I'll fast forward through this process and meet up with you guys again once everything's put together. All right, got my two halves put together. As you noticed, I was sanding down the seams a little bit just to make them nice and even. That way, once I paint it, you can barely tell that it was two parts put together. So that's what I was doing there. Literally just grabbed a piece of sandpaper. I started with about 120 grit and I worked my way down to about a 300 and made it nice and smooth. All right, so now we're just gonna go ahead and glue these two parts together and move on to the next step. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and take my time and glue these along with you guys instead of fast forwarding through it. For one reason or another in the game, there is a seam that runs along the shield this way, but not this way. So I've sanded my edges here a little bit to simulate that effect. But on this side, you just want to be careful that while you're putting it together, everything just lines up properly. So just slowly put everything, press it up against itself. And notice how I haven't let this other end touch either. All right, keeping them separate and putting them, gluing them separately. All right, there. And then this is a little tricky here. Kind of come back in and do those little details solo. Okay, now that I have that, I'm gonna go ahead and focus on this side. Bring this over. Start one end to the other, making sure that everything sits flush and aligns properly. Okay, and any unkempt little edges you can kind of pluck off, and that should do it. So now that we have this put together, next thing that we're going to do is grab our heat gun. And we're just gonna quickly heat up our surface area. Don't stay too long on it, right? You definitely want to heat up the areas where you sanded already. But don't stay too long on the seams because the heat will reopen the seams. So when you get to the seams, just quickly pass it, but focus the heat on more so the rest of the areas. All right. Once our part is nice and sealed on the outside, what we're going to do is grab ourselves some masking tape. Okay. We're going to cut off some pieces and we're going to stitch together basically where all of our seams are. Here. And the reason why we're doing this is because now we're going to be applying a lot of heat and we're going to be curving it. And as we're curving it, we don't want the heat from the heat gun to undo all of the work we did making our seams flush and covering them and all of that. So this will just prevent anything from happening to our seam areas as we work throughout the whole thing. So grab your heat gun, each part. I'll take this way on it. Remember to heat evenly on both sides. Okay. And while our foam is nice and warm, we're going to start giving it a curve. So we're literally curving it, twisting it, bending it outwards in order to give it the raised dome effect of the shield. Okay, so I'm literally just pushing up from behind, carving it into itself, working the edges to give it more of a dome feel. And you can tell it's kind of rising a little bit, so I'm just gonna keep going through this process. You can use your knee or your elbow in this process as well to kind of get more of a curve into it. And I'm gonna go ahead and fast forward through the process and see you guys once the shape is back in there. Alright, so now I have my dome shape, more or less. It's a very subtle rise. It's not really pronounced or anything, so unless you guys want it to come out a little bit more, by all means, feel free to keep bending. But I am content with where I am with this now. Alright, so we have our dome piece done. And this is where it becomes a little bit custom, because you guys can go about this one of two ways. What's gonna happen is our long pieces that we made earlier, we're gonna glue them to the outside edge here. Now you can do the longer strip on the edge, or you can do the shorter strip on the edge. The longer strip on the edge is gonna give you a larger looking shield. The shorter strip on the edge is still gonna make it look a little bit larger, but not as big as it was, you know, had you used the large one. So I do it with the short one, the small one on the outside, and then the big one on the inside. You can go about it however you'd like, depending on, you know, how much of a presence you want your shield to have. So I'm gonna go ahead and speed through this process. All right, so I have paint on both my pieces. I'm getting ready to put these down. One thing that you guys saw me put glue on the entirety of it. You don't have to do it that way if you're not comfortable with that. You can definitely put the glue in by sections and just go about it that way. So I don't know if you guys can see this, bring it in closer. I am just basically gluing this nice and flush against the surface, and I'm just gonna keep doing that until my two parts meet on the other side. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and fast forward through this. Okay, so once you guys get towards the end here, all I would do is put the foam behind itself and just kind of line it up with this side here. Mark that area with your blade or a marker, Sharpie or something like that. Okay, and then cut that piece out, because you want this to sit flush, so you really want to make sure that you get a nice straight cut on this. Okay, and before you glue the rest of this, go ahead and grab your contact cement and add some glue to the two edges that are about to connect with each other. Okay. I'll let that dry for a little bit. Remember, with barge, you really want to give it some time until you don't feel the tackiness of the glue anymore. That's when you know it's ready to be glued together. Okay. Since our outside has dried a little bit too, since we've stopped and paused for this, I'm gonna go ahead and just recoat my edges a little, so I can get up in there once everything dries together. Air this out. Okay, so now I'm gonna go ahead and put my connecting pieces first, and then force the foam on the edge here. All right. And now everything should stay stuck together nicely. All right. This is this side here that we just added, but it also reinforces it. Like this is a lot more sturdy now. I'm sure you'll notice once you put that together, it's not as floppy as just the 4 pieces together by themselves. So that's that. We're gonna go ahead and move on to the next step. All right, so now we're gonna grab our big strip, okay? And we're gonna glue this to the inside part of the shield like this, right? From the inside. So same thing that we did for the edge, we're gonna glue. What you may notice also is that I have sanded away the texture in here. So that took a little bit of time. I didn't record that process, it's pretty boring. But literally grab your sandpaper, rough up these edges so that the smooth edge here that you're going to be gluing to the inside has something to bite onto with the glue. Okay, so once we get to the edge here, same thing as before, go ahead and overlay it on itself. Grab your pen or marker and then go ahead and cut that out. All right, and before you glue the rest, grab some more glue. Glue the inside of your. A little bit of help drying with some air. Mind you, when I do this, I'm not blowing heat on the glue. I'm blowing air, just regular air, to help speed it up a little bit. Because blowing heat on the barge will reactivate it if it's dried up. Okay, so same thing as before. I'm gonna try and just glue my edges first and then worry about getting this nice and flush on the outside like so. Right. And then I can just go throughout the whole thing, just make sure that everything's just sitting nice and tight how it should. Yeah, now we're talking. All right, our shield is nice and sturdy, and the last thing we're going to need to do, well, not the last thing, but the next thing we're going to need to do is put this little dome piece on the inside here. So I'm going to go ahead and sand off a lot of my edges, make them nice and smooth, and just prep this basically to be finished up. So that step I'm going to skip over. You guys have already seen me do that, and I'll get back to you guys when I'm ready to put this in. All right, so I got back from sanding. As you can see, I kind of beveled my edges a little bit, made everything nice and flush so you can barely see the seams on the sides here. All right, that's an extra step that you guys can take, obviously, if you'd like. So before we put this in here, what I'm gonna do is we're going to create a few scuff marks, so like battle damage, so like scars on the metal here and on the outer edge there. And the way you can do this at home is with a Dremel. I'm going to show you guys how to do a couple of these nicks and scratches, but I'm going to fast forward through it with some of the more advanced tools that I have in the shop. All right, so doing some weathering, creating some nicks and scuffs and scratches. So I have a number of different Dremel heads, sanding bits here. It's like a flat circular one, a more cylindrical one. I call these pyramids. I don't know what they call them, but they're tapered in different sizes. And each of these will do something different. So I'm gonna go ahead and start with the big flat one first. Okay. Grab a scrap piece of foam just to show you guys the type of marks you can make. So this is good to make like scuff marks like this. I use this one for like deeper gouges. So I'll have it like, for example, right up on the edge. Right, I'll have that go like that. So you can see it's like a nice gouge from the edge to the surface. The other one they're a little more subtle. nicks and scratches. And these pyramid shaped ones I usually use to simulate some type of like blunt object, maybe like a bat or something. So I just kind of like at a medium high speed, I dig it into the foam and twist it around. Right? So it's kind of like a big dent that you would have maybe by like a mace or like a large wooden object or something like that. So combining all of these different types of scuffs and nicks will give you like a nice weathering effect. So this is just an example to show you guys what you can do on the shield. I'm gonna go ahead and fast forward using some of the tools that I have available in the shop that are not necessarily a Dremel. All right, I'm back from the bench grinder. As you can see, I've added a fair amount of scuffs, nicks, scratches, dents, bits all over the metal edge of the foam. Okay. Also did a couple of nicks, bruises, and scratches on this, and now we're gonna go ahead and glue this into place. So same process as before. We're gonna put barge on both sides of our piece. In this case, it's better if you insert the dome piece while the glue is still somewhat fresh so that it doesn't get stuck in that tight space, and then you have to like basically start over. So make sure that there is a little bit more barge on your piece than you need for this step so that you can slide it right into place and then just let it dry where it needs to. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that. That way it's easy to just kind of take on and off and rearrange until you get it exactly where it is that you need it. And then you can just let it be. So. Even. Just let that like this, and like that. Let's put it down a little bit. It basically allows you to freehand adjust it, because if both sides start drying up, that's basically the end of your adjustment period. And then turn it around and just finish your bond on the inside here. Then we have our nice dome shape in the middle of our shield. All right. So the next step from this is going to be to add this trim around here. So I'm gonna go ahead and grab some of my barge glue, this time in my little ketchup bottle, which this works really good for me. Go ahead and spread that around. All right. Now I'm gonna grab some barge and put it on the other side of this. And I'm gonna start where one of the seams begins. Actually going to put some glue on the ending edge here in anticipation for the other side. All right, so I'm going to start my piece right here and make my way around. Once I get to the other end, go ahead and grab my X-Acto figure out what, stay in place. Just figure out where this ends. Cut straight down. Okay. Again, bring this out. And the last of the glue to this part. Insert it. Try to make it touch the other side as flush as possible. All right, and there we have it. Most of the construction in our shield done. Now you will remember that we only use 3 strips on either end, so we still have 3 strips left. And what we're going to use these for is to create standoffs so that we can actually hold the shield on the inside. So we're going to move on to that step right now. So for our next step, we're going to make these pieces inside of here. Okay, so we're going to use whatever we have remaining of the large ones to do these side stems here. Okay, and what we have remaining of the smaller one to do the top connecting pieces. Don't worry about these. These are for my own personal link shield. These 2 standoffs here have magnets in them, and that's how I attach the shield to the sword. But that's besides the point. So, how we're gonna go about doing this is you basically want to, where's my example? Basically you want to go ahead and cut your pieces flat. And what you're gonna do is put your arm on the table, right? Put your arm out. You're gonna want to have a little bit of spacing between your hand and the table, which translates to the spacing that you're gonna have inside of the shield because of the dome curve that it has. So about 3/4 of an inch spacing from your hand to the table, and just kind of make a fist with your hand, and where your knuckle ends on side of the foam, just go ahead and mark that there. So I'll just draw a line. I'll call this H for hand. So this will be the standoff for my hand, right? And I'm gonna go ahead and grab my other piece left over, slice that out, and I'm gonna do the same thing, but this time I'm not gonna do a spacing. I'm just gonna directly put my arm on the table, and at the highest point of your arm, so for me it's like right here, I'm gonna go ahead and mark that. And what should happen, what you should notice, is that your mark for your arm should be slightly bigger than the mark for your hand. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and mark that A for my arm. And then I'm gonna proceed to cut 2 pieces of each. Now you can also wedge these together to make one thick part, right? If you want it to be a little bit more sturdy. So this is what I'm gonna do for these. If you just wanna use just one piece of this, that's fine as well. All right, I got my pieces cut up. I'll go ahead and grab my shield now. This part is, again, one of those parts that's up to you, depending if you're right-handed or left-handed. So I would hold my shield with my left arm and my sword with my right arm. So do the opposite if you're left-handed of what I'm about to do. So basically I put the shield on my arm, make sure that when I hold it up like this, the dragon heads are up, which means that my big end is here, my small end is here. And I will put that flat down on the table so I can remember that positioning. So I have my 2 A's here, and I will have my 2 H's here. And at this point, it's basically trial and error. You're gonna, put your arm in there, figure out where it is that it rests. So like for me, it's kind of right here and right here. More front, right? So right about here. So I'm gonna go ahead and mark that general area. So now it's visible. So I know that those 2 parts are going here. All right, so keeping with the same trend idea in mind, I'm gonna grab my arm parts, my A parts. I'm gonna make the same markings, except of course one with the arm. Right. And if they're not evenly spaced between the seam line here, you can go ahead and shift them and put those lines exactly where they belong. So go ahead and do that. Mark my 2 areas. Okay. Once you have your areas marked, we're gonna go ahead and sand this area so these things have something to grip onto. And then with the remaining pieces, we're gonna go ahead and glue a bridge between the 2 once they're installed. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and fast forward through that process and catch you guys on the next step. So I wanted my stems to have a little bit more of a dynamic look to them. So I wanted to look like a half cylinder more so than just a brick. So what I'm gonna go and do is bring this to the bandsaw and cut this out in that pattern. That way I have a nice rounded shape on the outside. You guys can also do this, you can sand that down with a Dremel or anything like that. Or if you like the way that it looks, the way that it is, you can go ahead and glue it, all right? There we have it. Our piece has our standoffs on it, and we are basically done with construction. Now we're gonna go ahead and start the painting process. All right, so we're in the paint booth now. First thing we're gonna do is do a couple coats of Plasti Dip. Make sure to seal the foam completely, that way it takes to our paint quite nicely. And then we're gonna use this metallic matte metal effects from Valspar. You can use any type of metallic that you'd like. This is just the one that I use in particular for this piece. We're also going to use a multi-textured spray to do this kind of like woodsy looking part right here. And we're also going to use some gold here, but this I'm just going to hand paint the dome with some gold paint later on in the tutorial. All right, so let's get to it. I'm going to coat this with Plasti Dip first. Alright, now that our prop is nice and dry, I'm gonna hit it with the silver. I'm really just gonna focus on this area right here and the edges right there. It doesn't really matter if it bleeds over because we'll mask it after everything is nice and dry. So let's get into it. Alright, so we've painted our shield up to this point, and now what we're gonna do is mask out our silver areas on the outside. So I'm going to go ahead and grab some tape. I'm actually going to grab some masking tape that's a little wider, and basically strip by strip, let's put some pieces down and follow my seam line. And I'm going to do this all the way around. And I'm also going to mask the inner dome circle here. So I'm gonna go ahead and speed through that process and catch you guys at the next step. Alright, all my parts are masked off that are gonna stay that silver color. I'm gonna go ahead and grab my multicolored textured spray. I'll spray this whole thing, probably do a couple of coats. This goes on pretty thick. I'll catch you guys once this is dry. Alright, everything looks nice and good. So now I'm gonna grab, so this is a bronze from Laser Bits color. I'm gonna use some of that to paint paint over this general area here. After that, I'm gonna grab this kind of like flesh tone paint. You can, I believe I got this at Home Depot, but you can combine different types of colors to do the infill for the dragon here. And then I'm gonna grab some black paint, mix it with a little bit of water, and do like a wash over the whole thing. So that's pretty much what we have left to do as far as like the painting is concerned. After that, I'll probably grab some faux leather and wrap the handles to make like a cool little grip. All right, so I'm gonna fast forward through those processes and catch you guys in a bit. That's it. That concludes our tutorial for the Breath of the Wild Traveler's Shield kit. You can see everything fits nice and lovely. We're ready to defend against the bokoblin arrows. Alright, hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial. Hope it was helpful. If you guys have any comments, questions, suggestions, please feel free to leave them in the comment section. I try to read those things as often as possible, as well as answer as often as I can. So again, this was Cass from GiveWave Studios, and I'll catch you guys on the next one. Cheers.